The wind felt colder than I remembered as I drove along the dirt path leading to my family's lake property. It had been nearly a year since I'd last been there. Life and work had pulled me away longer than expected. But now I was back. I'd been dreaming about this return the whole flight home. The way the pine trees framed the cabin. The way the lake glimmered like a mirror under the early morning sun. And that peaceful silence, the kind you can only get when you're miles from the nearest city. This place wasn't just real estate, it was mine. It was history, legacy, roots. My grandfather built that cabin with his own 2 hands in the 1960s. My father and I added the porch together when I was a teenager. It wasn't huge. It didn't need to be. It was perfect. But what I saw when I rounded the final turn made my chest tighten. My truck rolled to a slow stop. And I just stared. The trees were still there. The lake still sparkled. But my cabin, the heart of it all, was gone. Completely gone. In its place stood a massive white mansion with black stone trim, huge glass windows, and a decorative iron gate. The kind of building that screams money and ego. A fancy circular driveway wrapped around a fountain spitting water 6 feet into the air. The air even smelled like a hotel lobby. I thought I was in the wrong place, until I looked down and saw the old gravel trail where my front steps used to be. Then I saw the sign. It was mounted proudly on the gate in shiny brass letters. Private Estate of Carla James, HOA President. I felt like the ground had dropped out beneath me. I stepped out of the truck in a daze, boots crunching gravel that used to lead to my porch. I walked up to the gate like a ghost, trying to understand what I was seeing. My hands were trembling. I gripped the steel bars and looked through to the mansion that now stood on my land like it belonged there. That's when a man in a blue HOA polo and clipboard walked up from the side of the driveway. "Sir? Can I help you?" he asked, glancing at me like I was some trespasser. "This is my land," I said slowly, almost not believing my own words anymore. "There used to be a cabin here. It was mine. Where the hell is my cabin?" He stepped back slightly. I think you should speak with President Carla. She's in residence today." "In residence?" I repeated. "She built a mansion on top of my cabin and she's living in it?" "Sir, this is an HOA-managed community. We acquired abandoned land for development. Everything was done legally." "Abandoned?" I scoffed. "I was gone for work. I pay taxes. I never gave up my land." The guy didn't argue. He just said, "You'll need to speak with Carla," and buzzed open the gate without another word. I walked the stone path up to the massive front door like I was entering enemy territory. Every step I took, I remembered a piece of what used to be there. The old oak tree that shaded the deck, gone. The fire pit my father and I built, replaced by a koi pond. The swing I'd hung for my niece, nothing but decorative garden lights now. The door opened before I could knock. And there she was. Carla James. Late 50s. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, silk robe like she was in some luxury commercial. She didn't look surprised. In fact, it was like she was expecting me. "Mr. Dalton," she said smoothly, stepping aside. "Come in. I've been wondering when you'd return." I didn't move. "Where's my cabin?" "Gone," she said flatly. It was deemed structurally unsound. HOA condemned it. It was demolished 4 months ago. This home is part of the new redevelopment initiative. You were notified. My jaw clenched. I didn't sell it. I didn't give you permission. You can't just take someone's property like that. She raised a manicured eyebrow. Actually, we can. HOA regulations allow us to manage abandoned or neglected properties. You hadn't been here in over a year. Your mailbox overflowed. You never returned notices. We acted within the rules. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had mail forwarding, I snapped. I pay taxes every year. I never received any foreclosure notice, any hearing, nothing. Carla smiled like a snake. If you have documentation, you're welcome to take it up with the court. But I should warn you, this HOA has some of the finest legal backing in the county. You're telling me you just assumed I was gone for good and bulldozed my family home? She tilted her head. The neighborhood is moving forward. Your structure was outdated. We did you a favor. And frankly, this mansion increased the value of every home on this lake. I took a step back, heart pounding. I wanted to shout. I wanted to burn this whole place to the ground. But I didn't. I took a deep breath and stared into her cold, empty eyes. You had no right, I said calmly. And I'm going to prove it. She folded her arms. Good luck. I turned and walked out. Past her fountain. Past her iron gate. Past the koi pond where my fire pit used to be. But before I reached my truck, I took one long last look at the house she'd built over my memories. I had proof. I had records. I had people who remembered my cabin. And I had nothing to lose. Carla James thought she could bury my family's legacy under granite countertops and chandeliers. But what she didn't realize was that I'd just returned, and I was about to make her regret everything. I didn't go home that night. I drove straight to Jesse's place. Jesse Hartman had been my friend since high school, and more importantly now, he was a damn good attorney, the kind who knew every loophole in county law and every trick HOA boards liked to pull. I showed up at his door around 10 p.m. He took one look at my face and said, "You look like you just saw a ghost." I wish it had been a ghost, I muttered as I walked in. At least ghosts don't build mansions on your land. He raised an eyebrow. Start from the top. I laid everything out, the cabin gone, the mansion, Carla James, the smug look on her face, her claim that the property was abandoned, the HOA's so-called authority. Jesse didn't interrupt once. Just nodded, listened, and then leaned back in his chair like he was rewinding every detail in his brain. "You still have your property deed?" he finally asked. "Right here." I pulled the folder from my bag. Deed, tax receipts, photos, and even the email confirmation that I had mail forwarding activated before I left for overseas work. He flipped through it. "This is gold. She's done. I mean, this," he tapped the tax payment record, "this proves you never stopped owning or maintaining that land. They had no legal authority to touch it. But she's claiming HOA rules gave them the right." Jesse smirked. "HOA rules don't override state property law. That land was never transferred to the HOA. No signed documents. No foreclosure. No court action. This whole thing stinks of overreach." He stood up and grabbed a whiteboard from his study wall. He started drawing a timeline. "Okay, here's what we do. First, injunction. We stop any more construction or sale. Second, we file a civil claim, unlawful destruction of property, trespassing, land seizure, emotional distress. Third, we bring in media. Trust me, courts move faster when people are watching." It sounded like war. And I was ready for it. By the next morning, Jesse had filed the initial paperwork with the county courthouse. The injunction was granted that afternoon. Carla's dream mansion. Legally frozen in time. She couldn't sell it. Couldn't rent it. Couldn't touch a doorknob without risking contempt. Then came the phone call. She tried to play nice this time. "Mr. Dalton," her voice came through my phone like a sharp perfume, "I've been advised that you're pursuing legal action. Surely we can come to a reasonable solution." I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to stew. She continued, perhaps a settlement. We'd be happy to reimburse you for the estimated value of your previous structure. In cash. A generous amount. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Lady, you built a mansion on my land without permission, destroyed decades of family history, and now you want to pay me off? Be reasonable, she said quickly, trying to hide the desperation in her tone. You're fighting something bigger than you realize. The HOA has influence. Money. You really want a public battle? Yes, I said. I really do. And then I hung up. Over the next few weeks, Jesse and I worked day and night. We dug up county maps. Found original blueprints of the cabin. Located neighbors who remembered seeing me last year. Even tracked down a photo of my dad and I building the deck, complete with the same mountain range in the background. Carla tried to delay. She filed motion after motion. Her lawyers were sharks in suits. But Jesse knew the waters better. The court finally set the hearing date. It was surreal walking into the courthouse, wearing a borrowed suit, sitting in front of a judge while reporters whispered behind cameras. Carla arrived in full designer fashion, flanked by 3 attorneys and her trademark arrogance. She didn't look at me. The judge asked for opening statements. Carla's team began with rehearsed confidence. Your Honor, our client acted within the rights granted by the Lakewood Shores HOA Charter. The property appeared abandoned, presented safety risks, and was legally condemned according to the HOA's regulations. The new structure was built in good faith, with permits filed under the assumption of authority. Blah. 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 Then Jesse stood. Your Honor, this isn't about abandoned property. This is about theft. Mr. Dalton's ownership is not in question. The deed is valid. The taxes were paid. The HOA had zero legal standing to seize or develop the land. Their actions were not only negligent, they were criminally aggressive. He held up a stack of evidence. Emails sent from overseas confirming mail forwarding. Receipts for taxes paid. Pictures of the cabin weeks before demolition. And here, he pointed to a timeline, you'll see they moved in after the injunction was filed. That's contempt. The judge reviewed the documents in silence. Then turned to Carla. Mrs. James, did you personally approve the decision to demolish Mr. Dalton's cabin? She hesitated. I oversaw the project. But it was a board decision. Yet, the judge said, you registered the new estate under your own name. Carla's jaw tightened. I believed it was legal. And yet, the judge said again, no foreclosure. No title transfer. No legal acquisition. Carla looked like she wanted to melt into her chair. The judge leaned forward. It appears this HOA, under your leadership, has acted as if it were above the law. That ends today. He slammed the gavel once. We will reconvene for final ruling. But preliminary findings are in favor of Mr. Dalton. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just looked over at Carla as she finally glanced my way. Her eyes, once sharp and smug, now looked scared. And I hadn't even begun to take back what was mine. The morning of the final hearing, I woke up before the alarm. I didn't sleep much the night before, not out of fear, but anticipation. Months of court filings, witness interviews, and silent walks around the land that used to hold my grandfather's cabin had built up something inside me. Not rage. Not even revenge. Conviction. Today wasn't about a courtroom. It wasn't even about the mansion. It was about finally telling the truth loud enough that no one could pretend not to hear it. When I arrived, the courthouse parking lot was full. Reporters were already there, setting up cameras and mics. A couple of neighbors from the lake whispered as I walked by. That's the guy. The one whose home they tore down. I nodded but kept walking. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with energy. HOA cases weren't supposed to be exciting, but this one had gripped the entire community. People were tired of the abuse, tired of the threats, tired of the HOA using rules like weapons. My case had become a symbol. Carla James entered late. She wore a gray blazer this time instead of silk robes, but it didn't soften her. Her jaw was clenched, her movements sharper than before. Her lawyers flanked her like bodyguards, their faces blank as they carried binders stacked with whatever defense they thought still had a chance. But Jesse and I? We were ready. The judge entered and the room hushed. "All rise," the bailiff said, and the wooden floor creaked beneath a dozen tense bodies. Everyone sat. "Today," the judge began, "we deliver final judgment in the matter of Dalton versus Lakewood Shores Homeowners Association, concerning the unlawful seizure and demolition of private property." I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. Jesse patted my shoulder. He didn't look nervous. He looked like a man who already knew the outcome. The judge continued, flipping through the thick file on his bench. "The facts are clear. The plaintiff, Mr. Dalton, has provided irrefutable documentation proving continued ownership of the land located on parcel #674A, known informally as Dalton Cabin." He paused to let the murmurs settle. "Furthermore, it is evident the Homeowners Association, under the direction of Mrs. Carla James, proceeded with demolition and new construction on this land without acquiring title, foreclosure, or legal transfer of ownership. There was no judicial notice, no hearing, and no attempt to obtain consent from the rightful owner." Carla's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, if I may." "You may not," the judge said sharply. "You've had your say. I'm speaking now." He turned toward me. "Mr. Dalton, this court recognizes that your family's home was destroyed without cause. You have endured emotional and financial trauma as a result of the defendant's actions. The court hereby rules in your favor." I felt my heart punch against my chest. "The mansion currently occupying the property," the judge continued, "shall be forfeited to Mr. Dalton immediately. Full title and ownership of all structures on the land are transferred effective today." There were gasps around the courtroom. Even I had to grip the bench in front of me. But the judge wasn't finished. "In addition, the court orders the Lakewood Shores HOA to pay damages to Mr. Dalton in the amount of $380,000, to cover the cost of the demolished cabin, emotional distress, and punitive damages for unlawful trespass and destruction of property." I heard Jesse mutter under his breath, "Boom." And then the judge added one final blow. "Furthermore, Mrs. Carla James is found personally liable for negligence in her role as HOA President. Effective immediately, she is barred from holding any office or leadership position in any homeowners association within the state." Carla's face turned stone gray. For the first time since I met her, she had nothing to say. No smirk. No sideways insult. Just silence. She stood and tried to walk out, but the media was already waiting outside the courtroom. The microphones, the flashing cameras, they weren't there for her anymore. They wanted my story. But I didn't stop for interviews. I walked quietly to my truck. I drove back to the lake. And when I turned down the old gravel path again, everything was different, but not in the way you'd think. Sure, the mansion was technically mine now. I could have lived in it, rented it, sold it for a fortune. But every time I looked at it, all I saw was what used to be there: the creaky porch, the chipped green door, the fireplace with my initials carved into the stone. I couldn't keep it. Not like that. So I made a decision. Over the next month, I hired a crew, a different one than Carla had used, a local one. And we didn't renovate the mansion. We took it apart. Bit by bit. Carefully. Deliberately. We removed every wall, every floorboard, every chandelier she had imported from Italy. We recycled what we could, donated the rest, and then cleared the land until the earth was bare again. And then, right in the center of it all, I started rebuilding. Not a mansion. A cabin. A real one. We laid the foundation in early spring. Pinewood beams, hand-cut and stained. A new fireplace made from stones I pulled from the edge of the lake. A porch swing, just like the one I'd built for my niece. Every nail, every plank, every brick was a tribute, to my grandfather, to my father, and to the memory that no HOA rulebook could erase. Neighbors started stopping by. Some offered help. Others brought old photos of the original cabin. A few just stood there, quietly, and said thank you. And the final touch? I found an old sign in storage. A hand-carved wooden plaque my dad made when I was a kid. It had hung over the porch for decades. The letters were faded, but still there. Dalton's Rest. Since 1964. I hung it right where it belonged. And as I stood there, lake breeze brushing through my hair, birds chirping in the trees that had somehow survived it all, I smiled. Because Carla James thought legacy could be bulldozed. But she forgot one thing. You can't demolish what's already written in the soil. The new cabin stood exactly where the old one used to be. Not an inch off. Every time I stepped onto the porch, it was like stepping into a memory that had come full circle. The smell of fresh timber mixed with pine needles. The creak of the floorboards under my boots was intentional, we didn't silence the soul of it. We let the wood breathe, like it was alive. I built the interior like a modern tribute to the past. The fireplace was bigger now, but I made sure to carve the same initials into the side as my dad once did. The living room had new windows, but they framed the lake the exact same way. The kitchen had updated counters, but the same old kettle sat on the stove. I even tracked down a replica of the old rocking chair my grandfather used to sit in, watching the trees sway outside as he told stories that seemed too big for one man's life. And the best part? I could finally sleep in peace again. No HOA letters. No threats. No intrusions. No ridiculous fines for improper window curtains or non-conforming garden plants. Just quiet. About a month after the rebuild was finished, I got a letter in the mail, not from the HOA, but from one of the neighbors I barely knew before all this began. It read, "Thank you for standing up. You didn't just win for yourself. You won for all of us." And it was true. Word spread fast after the verdict. Other homeowners in Lakewood Shores came forward with their own horror stories, fences forced to be torn down, small sheds labeled unsightly, fines for grass that grew 1 inch too tall. The HOA board, once untouchable, was now under investigation. Carla's downfall had set off a chain reaction. 3 board members resigned in the following weeks. One of them sent me an apology note. I didn't reply. I didn't need revenge. I already had what I wanted, my land, my cabin, and the truth finally acknowledged in a courtroom and in front of the community. Carla tried to appeal the verdict. Her attorneys filed emergency motions, tried to claim unfair bias, procedural errors, every trick in the book. But Jesse was always 5 steps ahead. Every appeal got crushed like a fly under a hammer. Eventually, Carla's funds ran low. She had mortgaged properties just to cover legal fees. Rumor had it she even had to sell one of her imported cars to stay afloat. She vanished from the neighborhood a few weeks later. No one saw her go. The last time I heard her name was when someone said she moved downstate, took a job in a realtor's office, and tried to rebrand herself. But around here, she'd always be remembered for one thing: the woman who thought she could steal a legacy and ended up losing everything she built on stolen ground. I didn't tell my story on the news, despite all the requests. I turned down the interviews, the podcasts, the offers to write a book or license the story for a TV show. Why? Because some stories don't need to be sold. They need to be lived. And I was too busy living mine. The following summer, I invited family and close friends up to the cabin for a reunion. The lake shimmered, the grill was fired up, and laughter bounced off the trees just like it did when I was a kid. My nephew caught his first fish right off the dock. My niece helped me plant tomatoes in the same little garden patch my dad used to care for. As the sun went down and the fire crackled in the pit, I stood on the porch and looked out at the horizon. That same breeze came in off the lake. Same stars began to appear. Same sound of crickets and distant owls. And that's when I realized something. What they tried to destroy wasn't just a structure. It was a feeling. A place in the world that meant something. But they failed. Because a mansion can rise fast, but it doesn't mean it belongs. A cabin, though? Built with love. Maintained with pride. Fought for with everything you have. That belongs forever. I had one final touch I hadn't told anyone about. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I walked out past the edge of the property with a small lantern. I found the stump of the old oak tree that once guarded the porch. I reached into my backpack and pulled out a small glass jar, full of ash and sand and broken wood chips from the original cabin, which I'd saved quietly before it was all cleared away. I scattered it at the base of the stump. Then I planted a sapling. A new oak tree. It would take decades to grow. I might not even live long enough to see it stretch as tall as the one before. But that wasn't the point. The point was, everything they took, I brought back. And I left something for the future too. The next morning, I carved a final message into the post of the porch swing. Just 4 words.